business or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast, brought to you by Truelytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. This week on the show, I'm joined by Brian Thorpe, CEO of Wealth Tender, and we're going to be diving into some really exciting new opportunities for independent financial advisors and RIA firms to improve your discoverability online and increase the effectiveness of your web presence by adding testimonials. That's right. The SEC recently updated their rules on testimonials so that investment advisors can embrace the use of client testimonials much in the same way as every other business in the world can, right? It's really exciting stuff. This is a fantastic episode that will help you kick your marketing presence into high gear. Before we get to the conversation with Brian, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, SoundCloud, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a topic or a guest for the show, shoot us an email, podcast@truelytics.com, or swing by the website and use the contact form. Okay, let's light this candle. Here we go with Brian Thorpe. Brian Thorpe, wonderful to see you. Happy New Year, sir. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast.
Thank you very much, Mike. Happy New Year. Great to be here.
It is great to be here, right? Well, first of all, there's always that whole I'm glad to be here. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm really glad to still be here. It's wonderful to be breathing and alive and feeling very optimistic about the new year here. So I'm so grateful you decided to come on the show. We've got a lot to cover, and the stuff we're going to be talking about today, I think our audience is just going to eat up with a spoon because let's just dive into it. Heck, for the longest time, it's been pretty common knowledge in this industry that advisors are not allowed to accept testimonials or recommendations from clients or prospects or referral partners on the websites or on LinkedIn or in print, right? It's just not a tool that a financial advisor could use. And so, as an example, on LinkedIn, you couldn't, everybody else can have a recommendation. Brian Thorpe was so amazing to work with. He's the best. Advisors couldn't have that type of stuff. And we know the logic from regulators and compliance teams. It was pretty simple. Every investor's life is different. Their financial situation is unique. So allowing testimonials from somebody is kind of irrelevant, right? Was their thinking. But suddenly this has changed, right? So tell us what's changed. What's new in this landscape?
Yeah, it's a new day, Mike. And I think first and foremost, what's changed is the world has changed. And I think it was going in this direction even before COVID, but COVID has certainly accelerated this trend of people really coming to rely upon online reviews, whether it's going to a restaurant or hiring trust-based professionals, doctors, lawyers. And if reviews were available for financial advisors, I have absolute confidence that would have been the case for many years now for advisors as well. But to your point, the SEC historically has prohibited financial advisors from using online reviews, partly for the very reason that there's always been that level of concern that reviews could be, in fact, testimonials that perhaps if they were solicited would not provide the transparency that consumers need to make really informed decisions or have the important details to understand the veracity of that review. And so I actually give the SEC a lot of credit. They understand this is a massive opportunity for financial advisors to really strengthen their digital marketing in the years ahead. But it wasn't for the benefit of financial advisors that the SEC put this into place. Rather, if you look back at why they first proposed this rule and subsequently implemented it last year, was really all around the consumer. It was a recognition that, again, the world has changed, that consumers are turning to online reviews. And so rather than having an ongoing prohibition, let's find a way to ensure that advisors can ask their clients for reviews, but when those reviews are published, that the appropriate disclosures are incorporated to ensure that consumers can truly understand the veracity of that review, whether or not that review was written by somebody who's been a client or perhaps was never a client of the advisor, along with additional information that I think is really important for people to understand.
It really reminds me of the early days of social media usage for financial advisors, right? There were firms who just blanketly forbid their advisors from being on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and so forth. They're like, listen, you just can't do it, and we don't have the guidance from the SEC or FINRA. And FINRA was kind of opaque. They were just like, well, we don't know. Everyone was just kind of like waiting to see what happened. But exactly what you said happened. The SEC and FINRA both kind of started to understand this is a reality of life. Financial consumers are out there using these services. It is logical for an advisor to want to use them as well to interact with and then some are doing it even without asking permission, right? Beg forgiveness, right? Type of thing versus ask permission. And so just once the cat was out of the bags, guidance had to come down here. What are your thoughts on why it's so important? Why consumers, financial consumers, and we do have to think of them that way, right? They're consumers, right? They have choice. They have the ability to go shopping for their financial services, and choosing an advisor is one of the more important things they do. Why do you think that recommendations, if you will, are such an important part of the decision-making process now of how people, or testimonials, if you will, however you want to, we can use those interchangeably, I guess. Why do you think that's so important for them in their decision process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think a big part of that really comes down to the fact that what you're establishing as a consumer with an advisor is, in fact, a relationship. It's a personal relationship that affects one of the most important topics and matters to you and your life and the life of your family. And there are many websites where you can understand the facts about a financial advisor, their credentials, their years of education, maybe advanced designations that they hold. But without reviews, there's not an ability to really gain an emotional connection. And so I think that's what really is important about online reviews, testimonials going forward for advisors, is it's an opportunity to go beyond just providing consumers with facts about who you are on a typical directory profile page on the internet or your LinkedIn profile page, but now being able to really create a connection, because as you ask for reviews from clients, and the SEC allows you to ask for reviews from acquaintances as well, perhaps people that know you and trust you and can vouch for you. The types of feedback that they provide collectively really paints a picture. It creates a mosaic to help people understand who you are, much more than just understanding the credentials that are certainly important, but aren't really necessarily useful in distinguishing you from other advisors who are out there.
I really like the way that you phrase that. It's not just about the facts and figures, if you will, right? Like the features. Right? It's about the experience, right? And people want to understand the experience, because I say, I've said on this show a whole bunch of different times that, like, to some extent, financial advice, the actual mechanical components of it are commoditized. Just about every financial advisor has access to the same stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, right? They're likely using Navaplan or some other type of solution for financial planning. Like, a lot of the industry, there's a lot of sameness in the actual product itself, right? The packaged financial products and the way that things are delivered. The experience of working with the advisor, however, that's different. That is unique. It's because each human being is unique, right? And even if you had identical twins sitting next to each other, they might approach being your advisor slightly differently. You might feel a certain connection with that person over another, even though they look identical. So that's really fascinating, the way to think about it there. One of the other things you mentioned is the validation that we do. And I know I do this, like, you and I, before we click the record button, we're talking about plumbers and leak detection specialists for my house. For those listeners and viewers, I have got a mysterious leak in the kitchen wall, and nobody can seem to find it, including professionals. But it's, before you hire a pro to come to your house to do these types of things, you're asking around, right? You're pinging your neighbors, you're going online, researching, is this person good? Is there any reviews or whatever? I think we all do that, right? We all go to validate our decisions, especially now online. We've got a phone in my hand at all times. Let me just check on Brian, make sure he's okay.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, the fact of the matter is, most plumbers or other professionals, whether they're working on your home or, working on your body as a doctor, or again, lawyers that are out there, you really want to establish trust. And you can't just do that based upon the facts about that person, where they've been educated, the types of services that they mention on their website that they provide. It's really understanding just how good of a job they've done working with the clients that they've supported in the past. And that, again, is where reviews, I think, can be so impactful. We know that the number one thing that people are looking for when they hire a financial advisor is ultimately somebody that they can trust, because first and foremost, if you can't trust your advisor, then the least of your problems is whether or not they can outperform the S&P 500. And so that trust factor is something that online reviews can really provide. And again, I think that's why it's just going to be such a game changer for advisors that embrace reviews going forward.
I agree. I think it's going to be a huge game changer. But you think about, I had to buy 2 cars this year, right? one for me and one for my son. My previous car got totaled in an accident. And, when you're thinking about buying and making a large purchase, which is important to you, you're going to go out and look for some reviews, not only of the dealer that you might be working with, but also of the car. But you're not just looking for generic reviews, right? You're looking for, hey, this is who I am. I'm looking for something that approximate what my experience might be with this vehicle. And I think the same is true in working with a professional, right? Like, hey, I'm Mike Langford. I'm in the digital world here. This is what my family looks like. If I'm choosing an advisor or some other type of professional, I want somebody who's like handled my situation, right? And so when I'm looking at the review, it's not just the review itself. I'm looking at the reviewer as a validator, right? Like, who is this person reviewing this guy or this lady? Do I resonate with them? And am I likely to have a similar look and feel to it? And I think that's in the old days when reviews were just going to print with somebody's name under it, that might have been harder, right, for somebody to get that. But now that we have social media and we have people are much more digitally savvy, I think more attuned to being able to interpret, is this review something that is relevant to me? The validation process.
Yeah, and in fact, there's actually a good statistic out there that says more than 80% of people trust online reviews even more than personal recommendations. And that's even when they're looking to hire a doctor or choose a doctor. And I don't think that's a reflection that people don't trust their family and friends, but it's a reflection of the fact that those online reviews are often coming from people that have been a patient of that doctor or a client of that lawyer or that plumber. And so you're getting real bona fide experience and an understanding from people who may very well be just like you. And I think that's an important point too. You mentioned how commoditized the investment side of the financial planning industry has become. And increasingly, we're seeing financial advisors specializing in a particular niche. And that in itself, I think, lends itself to reviews becoming even more powerful going forward, because if you are a prospective client who fits into that niche, you're now looking to that website, you're finding out more information about that advisor, and again, reading about how they serve this particular demographic. That may resonate with you, but ultimately, when you can then go into the reviews and see reviews from people who clearly have experiences and they're sharing stories about the way that advisor has helped them with their particular needs, which resonate with you because those needs are similar to your own, it becomes a really powerful 1-2 punch to combine those facts with those reviews to get that emotional connection that can really drive consumers to pick up the phone and make that first appointment.
I love it. Now, before we go any deeper, because we have some really cool stuff to talk about how advisors can actually do this, how they can have testimonials and reviews and be compliant in doing so. There's 2 words that always come up when we talk about this type of stuff. And when I've worked up with digital strategy for a lot of wealth management firms over the years, I always make sure these come up so that people understand it. So the first word, and our compliance officer is going to be shaking their head, I'm sure. The first word is entanglement, and the second word is adoption, right? Entanglement happens when a financial advisor or a firm is involved in the actual creation of the content, right? So if you are an advisor and you help your client write up a review, or you compensate them in some way, like give them a discount or tickets to a ball game or whatever, you are now effectively entangled in that. Now, by the way, these aren't necessarily bad. They just are, right? And they, like, so as an example of entanglement, if I paid somebody or in any way, shape or form, or helped them with a review, I have to disclose it. I'm sure you're going to talk about the disclosures in more detail. And the second one, adoption, and this has long been the case. And this is why so many financial firms had some issues with likes in the early days of social media. If I like a post from you on Twitter or Facebook or wherever, and that has something to do with financial markets, if I like it, I'm effectively adopting that position, right? There's almost like endorsement. I think of it almost like I'm saying, yes, I agree with this type of thing. Again, not bad. It just is, right? And it can be problematic if you're doing it and it causes a reasonable person to take action based on your endorsement, right? And adoption can also be if, like, you have on your website, you allow comments on your blog. And a client comes in and comments and says something and it says, oh yeah, absolutely. Mike told me to buy Apple stock, and thank God I did, because Apple is the best company ever. It's going to go up into the moon. It's going to be the first $10 trillion company. If you leave that comment on your website, you have effectively adopted that as part of the content. So anyways, I'm long rambling. I thought it was worth talking about these types of things. You're the expert here. Have the rules that the SEC just came down, have they changed regarding those areas, or are they just kind of added more clarity to, like, how do you handle those types of things?
Yeah, they have definitely added a lot more clarity. The SEC marketing rule itself, depending upon the version you read, is around 400 pages. So it's you definitely need a few bags of popcorn to get through it. What's interesting is if you take a look back prior to the new marketing rule becoming effective, testimonials weren't prohibited by the SEC. Rather, it was if they were solicited that they were prohibited. And to your point, these concepts of entanglement or adoption have essentially always been around and out there. And as an advisor, as long as you did not ask for that review, let's just assume the review came in on a site like Google or Yelp. As long as you didn't ask for that review, then you haven't done anything wrong. Now, if you like that review, or if you respond to that review, then you have entangled yourself with it and or adopted that review, depending upon the nature of your response or how you're using it. For example, bringing it onto your website, as you suggested. What the SEC has done in the new marketing rule is provided greater clarification to say, okay, going forward, we are going to allow you to ask for reviews, to solicit reviews from your clients, from other people. So if you ask for a review from a client, a current client, the SEC considers that to be a testimonial. If you ask for a review from an acquaintance, somebody other than a current client, it could also be a past client, then the SEC refers to that as an endorsement. And those are important distinctions, but also important to recognize that going forward, you as an advisor can ask for reviews from both clients, former clients, as well as other acquaintances that you think can vouch for you and provide good context to help other people that are thinking about hiring you. If you do that, there is still an open question as to whether or not the simple act of asking for that review is in fact entangling you with it. So we're waiting for additional clarification from the SEC on that point. And it's a finer point, but it's a really important one. So here's an example of how this plays into the fold. If the act of asking for a review is deemed by the SEC to itself entangle you, historically, before the new marketing rule, that would have been problematic because solicited testimonials weren't permitted. But now with the new rule, it's okay to ask for that review, but as long as you have solicited that review, you're going to need to comply with the disclosure requirements of the new rule. So in other words, entanglement and adoption going forward is okay, but if you've become entangled or you've adopted that online review, that testimonial, it's going to be important that you ensure you follow the rules within the new marketing rule to ensure proper disclosures that accompany that and ensure that your policies and procedures are all up to date and aligned with the new rule to account for that as well. What we're waiting for with the additional clarification that will be useful from the SEC is around that very point. Does the simple act of asking for a review in itself entangle an advisor? What's interesting is if we look over to the FINRA side of the world, so registered representatives who are affiliated and regulated by FINRA, which ultimately is overseen by the Securities and Exchange Commission that has put forth this new rule that most specifically impacts RIAs. What's interesting is FINRA actually has a rule or clarification they provided a couple of years ago. It's Regulatory Notice 1718, where they indicate that unsolicited reviews that are posted on websites like Google and Yelp don't trigger the disclosure requirements. But essentially, what that's implying is if you, as a registered representative, have asked for a review and it's published on a site like Google or Yelp, then you need to ensure that the appropriate disclosures and requirements are met because you've effectively triggered it by asking for that review. And so the challenge becomes for SEC RIAs going forward is, do we anticipate the SEC is going to have more relaxed standards than what FINRA is holding registered representatives to under the testimonial rule there? And if we believe that, then a lot of the marketing gurus that are out there today suggesting that advisors, RIAs, can ask for reviews on sites like Google, if we get that clarification from the SEC that asking for a review does not entangle you, then it's going to be okay to ask for reviews on Google. But if we get clarification from the SEC that says, you know what, we are actually considered, just like FINRA, we consider the act of asking for a review itself to entangle you with it, in which case it's going to be critical that you incorporate the necessary disclosure requirements. And so platforms like Google and Yelp aren't designed to accommodate or include those types of disclosures. So you become in this catch-22 position if you're looking to use that type of a platform. And that's really why we designed Wealth Tender as the first compliant review platform, so that when you do get a review as an advisor from a client or from an acquaintance, it's easy to incorporate those disclosures so that you don't have to run the risk of being out of compliance with those disclosure requirements if they are in fact triggered based upon the SEC's interpretation going forward. I know that was a mouthful, but it's definitely.
No, I love it. I'm sitting here like, no, this is awesome. You just created the best segue in the world for me to make my life a lot easier. My job to interview you about this. This stuff should be really familiar to advisors and any executive at a wealth management firm who has a team of advisors, whether that's a independent broker dealer or a large RIA, whatever. Your social media platforms and your email platforms have some level of disclosure requirements there, and they also have some other compliance, right? So they have to be archived, they have to be supervisable, you have to have tools in place so that a compliance officer or principal of the firm can spot check things. You should have some mechanisms in place to make sure that the content that is going out from your advisors, whether it's just original content that's a blog post or just a post or interactive content, you've got to be able to review it and make sure that it's kosher, right? It's pretty standard stuff, not that big of a deal. And once the technology came to make that easy, compliance teams are just flowing, right? Because it's not that big of a deal now, right? There's all sorts of them. There's Hearsay Social, there's Actians, and blah, blah, blah. There's Smarsh, right? There's a whole bunch of those tools. And now for this, there's Wealth Tender, right? So let's dive in to the company. And as I teed it up in my intro, and people are probably like, Mike, when are you going to get to how we can do this, right? Here we are. This is the big reveal. How does Wealth Tender work, right? If I visit the website, I see that the company is dedicated to helping people discover the best financial advisors, coaches, educators, and resources based on their individual needs. How are you accomplishing this mission? But I guess most specifically, how are you helping people allow for testimonials and making sure that they are compliant with the appropriate disclosures and so forth?
Yeah, all great questions. And it's been a lot of fun. So the way we've designed Wealth Tender when we launched wasn't in anticipation that the rule was going to be forthcoming as quickly as it did, but we didn't expect that the SEC might be putting out this type of a marketing rule that would finally allow for advisors to collect and ask for testimonials going forward. So that's been tremendous to now position Wealth Tender as the first financial advisor review platform that's compliant with this new rule. With that said, it's been a little bit of hurry up and wait since the rule took effect in May of last year, as many compliance departments are looking for a little bit more guidance, clarification from the SEC, as well as just ensuring that they have their policies and procedures in place, which are a prerequisite before advisors can ask for testimonials. With that said, the way we've designed Wealth Tender is, to your point, helping consumers find the best financial advisor for their individual needs. But also, if a consumer isn't yet ready to work with an advisor, maybe they are more focused on building an emergency fund or getting out of debt, we also have financial coaches available on the platform as well as several hundred personal finance blog owners, podcast owners in our community, so that advisors can find resources to more self-help resources to better understand how they can improve their finances. But ultimately, we were working to graduate consumers up into the arms of a financial advisor who is best suited for them. And the way that we do that is providing over 500 articles to date, a lot more coming this year, that provide a broad range of education across a number of topics. And within those articles and guides that we make available, financial advisors who join our platform have the opportunity to be quoted and featured. Many of these articles are increasingly being syndicated on sites like MSN.com, and we're actually working on a deal right now to provide visibility for advisors in our community through the Associated Press. So some big opportunities there, even before we get into the testimonials. With that said, a big part of our focus in the new year, in 2022, is helping onboard advisors that are interested in getting started with online reviews, with testimonials, and taking advantage of the new marketing rules. So we've put out playbook, articles, templates, checklists to help advisors do just that. And it's really not rocket science in terms of what the SEC is looking for. I think they've done a nice job of helping advisors understand that the expectations within these online reviews are that disclosure should be very short and sweet. So unlike a pharmaceutical ad in a magazine where you have a full page of disclosures, you really will be able to have online reviews with short, succinct disclosures to simply help consumers understand if that review was written by a client of yours or not, whether or not that reviewer was compensated or not, and any material conflicts of interest. And then for the compliance officers that want to have a full page of disclosures, you can link to that. You can have an expandable accordion that includes that laundry list of disclosures. But importantly, it really should be a good experience for the consumer that only has to see those most salient points that the SEC believes is really important for people to make a more informed and educated decision. So as an advisor, when you join Wealth Tender, you'll have a traditional looking profile page. We include a lot of information and make it easy for consumers to link to your calendar, to set up an appointment. But what you'll also find as a consumer scrolls down the page are all of the different articles and guides that you as an advisor are featured in. Because again, we really want to help consumers get to know who you are, what you're all about, beyond just those facts and figures about your education and experience. And the next step, and a very logical step, is now incorporating reviews going forward. And so the online reviews feature, what we refer to as certified advisor reviews, is a function that advisors can turn on or turn off whenever they're ready. And so for advisors who are really trying to take advantage of this marketing rule opportunity, we're excited to have advisors coming on board that today are working with their compliance departments to get through those final hurdles. And then we expect in the next few weeks, we'll start to see advisors really turning on that feature and getting started. And then I think from there, it really will just open up the eyes to many compliance departments and others out there, just how powerful this can be, and that it really shouldn't be that scary of a proposition to get started.
I love the approach that you've taken because it works in my mind and in my experience is in the way that advisors interact with clients, prospects, and referral partners, right? That as a general rule, when a consumer is looking for a financial advisor, they don't go to Google and say, find me financial advisor in Austin, Texas, right? I'm sure it does happen. It's not the most common way, right? Most of the time, they talk to somebody they know, or they've met an advisor at an event, or went to some advisors, seminar or something, or the advisor came into the workplace, or what. Usually that's the way that it happened. And as we've talked about earlier, now part of the process is discovery, is validation, right? You'll say, oh, let me go make sure this guy, Brian Thorpe, is a real advisor. Let me go check out his website. Let me go take a look at him on LinkedIn and wherever else I might want to find him. And if they've provided a website like Wealth Tender Experience, where I can now go and see, oh, there's reviews, right? There's testimonials here. Here's some interesting content that Brian has written or produced. That allows me to kind of read through, like, yeah, maybe this guy is a match for me. He's dealing with some of the same issues that helped others with the issues that I'm helping with, right? I always talk about, is it Zig Ziglar or one of the sales guys? guru guys who says, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. We've all heard that. But there's a couple of other things that are missing there, right? Like, number one, I got to feel like you're competent, like you know what you're doing, right? And I've got to have some familiarity with you. Like, I've got to see your work, if you will, like know that you're good at what you do. And then I also have to like see you frequently enough and consume you. So I love the approach there. And hell, just the fact that you have a calendar link there is amazing as well. That's phenomenal. It's badass. Let's jump into the content piece, because this is so important. You at Wealthtender are doing an amazing job on the content with your content marketing efforts. And if you go to wealthtender.com/advisor, you're going to see advisors, you're going to see a whole bunch of great stuff. And we'll link that up in the show notes here. One of the posts I happened to see, actually somebody else share on LinkedIn. And I was like, and that happens to be, I knew you were coming on the show. It's a new post called 22 Financial Advisor Marketing Tips to Attract New Clients in 2022. So nice play on 22 there. Fantastic stuff. So first of all, I go, how are you guys so great at this content marketing stuff? Like, how are you doing it? And how do you like help advisors with that process?
Yeah, well, thanks for the kind words. That particular article fits more into our kind of B2B. So we want to put our money where our mouth is. We believe that financial advisors looking to attract consumers as clients can really benefit from content marketing. And we want to ensure that advisors who join our community have the opportunity to be featured in articles, quoted in guides, without having to do the heavy lifting of writing their own full articles. So we take a lot of that burden off their plate. And that's what the vast majority of articles and guides on the Wealthtender website are oriented to. So oriented to consumers and helping advisors gain that visibility to strengthen their online reputation, build authority in their area of specialization, and ultimately benefit their SEO as well. The 22 Financial Advisor Marketing Tips for 2022 article that you mentioned is an example of us putting our money where our mouth is. So articles that are more oriented to help provide education for advisors that are looking to do the very thing that we can help them with, and hopefully attracting them to not only Wealthtender as a digital marketing platform to help grow their business, but also we introduce a number of different tools, resources, and companies that we believe can be beneficial for advisors to consider using as well to strengthen their marketing activities. Going back to the consumer articles, we've done I think, nice job of really providing a really diverse range of articles on a broad range of topics. And increasingly, what we're trying to do as well is educate consumers on the availability of advisors who may not necessarily be down the street, but could be a better fit for their individual needs based upon that niche or area of specialization that the advisor has chosen to focus on and may be very relevant to that consumer. And I think COVID has really accelerated this. And so we've leaned into that with a lot of our content, where we believe that there will continue to be many people who want to have that advisor that lives down the street, that lives in the community. But increasingly, we think that zip code should be a factor, but not the primary factor when consumers are looking to hire a financial advisor. And so many of the websites that are out there today to help consumers find an advisor start by saying, put in your zip code, and then we're going to find the 3 best advisors for you. And that will still, again, be a viable way to find an advisor, but increasingly, we believe, antiquated, as more people can choose to work with the advisor who specializes in that area of importance to them. So as an example of that, we have content, we have articles that are focused on areas that we think will resonate with consumers and ultimately can help connect those consumers with advisors in that area of interest. So cryptocurrency, as an example, we've seen a tremendous spike in our traffic over the last year from consumers who are interested in cryptocurrency related topics. And one of the best performing articles we have on our site is actually a Q&A with a financial advisor based in Houston, Ryan Firth, who specializes in working with cryptocurrency investors. And a lot of consumers are flocking to that article. And so we've really leaned into that with more articles to help them understand the risks involved with investing in cryptocurrencies, but also the benefits of working with an advisor who understands this particular digital asset class if they are going to, move forward, how an advisor can help. But beyond that, it's also recognizing we have advisors specializing in a number of niches, whether it's occupations or industries or by age and life stage. So over 20 advisors, for example, who are affiliated with the XY Planning Network. So naturally serving Generation X, Gen Y, younger consumers. And so we have articles to help millennials and younger consumers better understand their own financial planning needs and educating them on the benefits of working with an advisor who specializes in serving that demographic, all of whom can work with clients virtually. Others, like in fact in Austin, Texas, Jane Mepham, who is focused on helping immigrants. She herself came to this country and understands the challenges of coming to the United States as an immigrant, as a foreign-born citizen, and what that's like, and specializing in that particular demographic. So we have opportunities to feature advisors in articles that are very specific to their niche, as well as more general articles. And collectively, we think it's really just providing a great way for consumers to become smarter and more educated on the types of advisors that could be best suited for them, whether or not they live nearby.
I could not love this anymore, and I hadn't really thought about this as much before you brought this up. Well, we've talked a little bit about the fact that people and advisors specifically getting more comfortable with Zoom and so forth has really opened up their potential to do business beyond their local nexus. And I love the fact that you're coming at it from the consumer side too, right? So many clients have historically thought, I need a financial advisor whose office is here in Austin. Like, of course I would have an advisor who's here in Austin because God forbid I have to go to their office. But the reality is, like, how often do you need to go to your financial advisor's office? It's not that common, actually. I mean, with all the ability to share digital documents and so forth, and to spool up face-to-face as we're doing here recording, not that difficult task. And I love the fact that you're saying you can get really laser focused. And so it can be a niche like, hey, if you're into Formula One, as an example, and you don't live in Austin where the only Formula One track is in America, I'm your guy. I'm really into Formula One, and you can talk. Or heck, I went to Boston University. Not that many Boston University alum financial advisors here in Austin. If I wanted to do business with one, I can find a lot of them in the Northeast, right? So there's all these different things, and you laid out a couple of them. But it's a wonderfully new landscape here where you can pick the advisor that fits things that are important to you, right? That whether it's, hey, I want a female advisor, I want somebody from a certain other demographic, whether it's ethnic or LGBTQ or something like that, you can find somebody, right? Even if they're not in your local hometown, you can connect with the person that's best for you. That's really fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
How is that? Good.
It's been a lot of fun.
How's that been received?
How has that been received? I would say both by consumers as well as advisors, it's been received exceptionally well. And from a consumer perspective, what's been fun is just seeing the increasing awareness among consumers that, wow, I didn't know that one financial advisor might be different than another. And again, in this age of robo-advisors and a lot of people saying, I can just do all of this myself, the awareness that we're being able to create through these articles that, hey, again, as a cryptocurrency investor, had you considered somebody that has gone through advanced designations that are starting to emerge in that area, or just building that base of knowledge and experience to help you avoid some of the traps that most people simply don't have time to figure out on their own? And that's just one example that's a little bit more on the investing side. But we also have an advisor, for example, Stephanie McCullough in Philadelphia, that works with clients nationwide, specifically divorced women, single women. And again, another great example for women who have read some of the articles that we've published that now become aware, like, wow, here's an advisor I can work with that understands exactly what I've been through, what my life experience is like, and then the ability to work with that advisor and realize that I'm not just getting an advisor, I'm also becoming part of a community that this advisor serves, which include people just like me. And again, that's where online reviews that start to emerge from that base of clients that share that same type of experience are really going to be powerful for advisors, especially that are focused on a particular niche or interested in building that area of specialization nationwide.
That's awesome. It's, I've told this story on this podcast, I think a couple of different times in different situations, but there's the guys who wrote the book Millionaire Next Door. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that. A couple of economists, and they just studied millionaires, American millionaires, and looked for patterns, right? And a lot of the book is like, it's not what you think. Not all of them are like, lawyers or doctors or tech executives. A lot of them own things like, trash collection companies or whatever. They're typically end up being small business owners and blah, blah, blah. Well, they wrote a follow-up book that was less famous. It was called Networking with Millionaires. And they tell a few different stories about and it's kind of aimed at people who want to serve millionaires or like financial advisors. Like, how do you get in front of them? And one of the stories they tell in the book is of this insurance agent who is like one of the top, he's always the top guy at his firm. He's always getting the award, but he never comes to the insurance conference and he never gets his award. And so somebody asked him about it. He's like, well, why don't you ever come? He's like, well, I serve, race car drivers. And I got to tell you something. I've never sold a single insurance policy at the insurance convention. He's like, but I'm out with my people. He's at these NASCAR races and this and that. And this is where he's doing his business. And what you were just describing is that, right? You be in a community, right? So if you serve tech industry professionals, writing a lot of articles about tech and the unique needs of people who are in the tech industry, or if you serve women, and well, not just women more broadly, but maybe it's single women who have certain professional backgrounds or whatever, like that type of thing, you get ensconced in the community and you become the advisor who is the expert at serving that. So it's really fantastic that you shaped it that way.
Yeah, and along those lines, a financial advisor that is serving their clients day in and day out doesn't necessarily have the means, the resources, the budget to focus on building their website, getting that domain authority with Google and attracting the traffic. And so the advisors that join our community can really leverage the domain authority that we've built with Google so that when you're featured in an article or a guide, the opportunity for that article or guide to rank amongst the top results for that particular term that you are focused on, your niche or your area of specialization, is going to be much greater. And so you can spend more time with your clients, leverage the platform that we've established, and I think everybody wins in that scenario.
Love it. Love it. All right. We're getting ready to turn for home here, but I have a question. I want to talk about your journey. So you and I have now known each other for a few years. I think we first met at an event that I host here in Austin for South by Southwest. It's called SoFine, Social Financial at South by Southwest. And I think we met several years ago. I think even before you launched Wealth Tender was the first time we met. So it was really kind of interesting to see this journey. But for most of your career prior to Wealth Tender, you were an executive at a large financial services company. And if you want to name the name, go right ahead. I don't want to out your former employer unless you're comfortable with it. But you made a decision to jump into the startup world, right? And I think this is wild, right? Because a lot of times when we think of startup founders, people start to think of, oh, this kid out of college, whatever. It's like, but former executives like yourself who've had a wealth of experience in leadership in larger companies. It's funny, there's been some data that shows tend to do much, much better than their younger counterparts, right? They actually understand how to run a business. What was your inspiration for Wealth Tender, and how are you adjusting to startup life?
Yeah, well, I think journey is the right word. It's certainly been a journey, and it's been a lot of fun. And, I'm happy to disclose, I was with Invesco for 22 years. They're headquartered in Atlanta, but I was based in our Houston office, and most recently was the head of the key account team there. Great group of people. It's a wonderful organization. But when they did the Oppenheimer acquisition back in 2019, I put my hand up and said I would welcome the opportunity to gracefully bow out, exit stage left, because I've always wanted to try my hand at something more entrepreneurial. And Wealth Tender has really provided me with that opportunity. One of the things I've always been a big believer in is that regulatory change creates opportunities for disruption. And I have had that experience having been at having been at Invesco for 20 plus years of seeing various regulatory changes take shape and the opportunities that it's presented. But being part of a large organization, it was much more difficult to quickly navigate and maneuver. Whereas with Wealth Tender, we can move much quicker. And as I mentioned at the outset, didn't necessarily know when the SEC might launch this new marketing rule, but was happy to see when they did, and then really incorporate our platform to accommodate that so that we could be that first mover in the online reviews in the testimonial space for financial advisors. So the adjustments have certainly been, getting used to the paycheck or lack thereof. But it's been a labor of love. It's been a lot of fun. I have a very supportive wife who I can't thank enough for encouraging me along the way, and a great team, including our lead developer in Austin, and surrounding myself with lots of great people that have contributed significantly to getting to the point where we are today.
What's been and I ask this of a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm just curious, like, what's been your kind of the biggest surprise so far? The thing that you didn't see coming that you're like, and by the way, this could be good or bad. It could be dude, I had no idea this was going to be this brutal. Or it could be what's really delighted me? Like I've seen this, I didn't know this was coming.
Yeah, I would have to say the technology side. I've always been a big fan of technology and, perhaps involved at the outskirts. And one of the things I was most excited about coming into this was, oh, cool, I get to build a website, and just learning how challenging that is. Things that perhaps tend to break a little bit more frequently. At least they did when we were getting started. And now very happy with where we are and have a very stable platform and confidence in terms of what we've built. Yeah. But the early days, what I thought was just going to take, we'll have this up and running in a couple of weeks, took much, much longer. So that's been the biggest challenge. But it's also opened my eyes to the opportunities as well, and has given me, again, kind of increased confidence, in kind of this fintech space of just how impactful the technology, the role of technology can be, and some of the disruption and the opportunities that I think are out there for creating innovation for financial advisors in our industry going forward.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on the progress so far. It's fantastic what you've built. I'm incredibly grateful for you coming on the show and sharing it with the Modern Financial Advisor audience. I know people are going to get a lot out of this. People are going to want to follow up. I'm going to send them to wealthtender.com, number one, first and foremost. But you're also active on social media platforms. I assume you're on LinkedIn and other places. What's your preferred social platform for people to link up with you?
Yeah, so anyone's welcome to email me, Brian, Brian, at wealthtender.com. And I am easily found on LinkedIn, and you can find WealthTender on all the other social sites pretty easily as well.
Fantastic. Well, Brian, thank you so very much for coming on the show. It's been fantastic catching up.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much for listening to and/or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. Huge props to my man, Brian Thorpe from Wealth Tender. Fantastic having him on the show. I've had many conversations with Brian over the years. And actually, the first time I met Brian, he was kind of in the stealth mode working on Wealth Tender. It's always really exciting to meet a startup founder who brings his vision or her vision to life, and then have the opportunity to kind of, be a bullhorn, offer them a stage, however you want to think about it. Have them come on this podcast, tell the world about it. And as you've probably heard over the years with me at the helm of the show, I don't have somebody on where I'm just going to pay them lip service and go, yeah, that's fantastic, right? I really do believe, and I'm actually genuinely excited about this stuff. I mean, this isn't Kelly Ripa telling you about her washing machine. She's not doing her own laundry, right? But I actually love this stuff. This is really good stuff, okay? So please do check out Wealth Tender. Lots of good stuff for you there. And by the way, if you like this episode of the show, chances are people in your community are going to like it as well. So give it a share on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you like to hang out online. Let people know you heard this episode of the show, and they should check it out as well. All right. Lastly, as you heard me say earlier, please do make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast, and send in your suggestions for guests and topics, podcast@truelytics.com. We would love to hear from you. All right. That's it. That's all I got. Hope you're staying safe, and be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.